Hello, Courtney. Hello, Supervisor.
Hello.
Everybody, again to our Empowerment Congress Homelessness Working Group meeting today, July 10th, 2025. I can't believe we're already more than halfway through 2025. Time has been flying. At today's meeting, I first would like to recap our meeting a few weeks ago, and that was on June 26th. At our last meeting, this was a fantastic meeting, and it was very much a working and strategy oriented meeting. We wanted to create a space for our Empowerment Congress Homelessness Working Group members to share kind of the directionality of where we would like our EC Homelessness Working Group to move towards. What are some things that we'd like to further engage in? Um, and we had a lot of great discussion. Our meeting went pretty long, and as a few of us shared, we could have kept talking for another 4 hours, but it was a really good discussion, and we addressed some very pertinent topics that are coming up within our city, our county, our space, and just for us as Angelinos as we, deal with supporting our fellow Angelinos who are unhoused, learning more about all of the changes and updates in our system locally, as well as from a national perspective, and how we're also impacted by some events globally, and how they relate to what we do. So we had some fantastic suggestions of ways in which we'd like to further engage, and we look forward to sharing more about those soon. But before I do that, I would like to pass it off to our founder and my favorite supervisor ever, Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas.
Uh, Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We appreciate the opportunity to educate, engage, and empower. I maintain, and we'll say more about this as we move into our conversation on some of the current findings where um, Ray will have a kind of back and forth, as well as invite Derek's insights and the others. So, who are on the call, you may appreciate the fact in the last meeting there was a conversation that was more of a dialogue among those who have concerns around this issue. And we do not intend to release on this. We've been at this for over a decade in various iterations. More to be said about that in a bit, but it's important that we stay the course. It's tough. The data is mixed, and yet we have an obligation, in my view, a moral obligation to engage here and to be smart about it, and to continue to do the work that we can do. Um, Shout out to Dr. Jerry Abraham. We appreciate his being with us. He leans in, and we celebrate his work throughout the community at Kedron, at the LA Medical Association, as president, and as walking with us in the Empowerment Congress and the Institute for Nonviolence in Los Angeles. He's all that and then some. So we appreciate you, sir, joining us tonight. Ray, back to you, and then we'll dive into these current findings. Our timeline is to conclude around 7 or thereabouts. So our comments will be focused, directed, crisp, and the like. Now, I understand that you said that last time we met, you could have continued to talk for a while on. We will resist that temptation. There are only 2 known Baptists on this call, and we're disciplined. We don't talk all night. We're going to do what we need to do and keep it pushing.
All right, sounds like a plan.
All right, let's go.
And we all know I'm a talker as well, so you can feel free to wrangle me too.
Uh, we didn't
So,
want to make it personal, but I'm glad
all
you.
right. I won't get offended, Supervisor, I promise. All right. And if I need backup, I'll be like, Pastor Johnson, can you send
Yeah, right
me,
there.
That's
please?
right.
He,
So,
he's Baptist, so there we go.
all right. Thank you. All right. All right, everyone. Well, one of the things I want to highlight, we have in the agenda, we have shared 4 articles. They are all hyperlinked. But before we do that, I would like to share an update on one of my favorite periodical as it pertains to homelessness in Los Angeles, and that is a newsletter and periodical that you may be receiving electronically. It is Praxis. So I would like to share that Praxis is fantastic, and some of articles similar to these have previously been included in Praxis. Praxis is doing a really cool revamp right now, and so it will resume shortly. And as we think about that, we thought it was important to highlight almost updates and advancements and findings as it pertains to homelessness here in Los Angeles County. I know our first article is how Los Angeles, the real story of how LA became the epicenter of the US's homelessness crisis. And Supervisor, I would actually love your thoughts on this, please,
All right.
because I,
So what I'd like you to do is bring it up and share the screen, and we'll walk through it. And we'll do that with uh,
oh, perfect.
all 4 of these articles in record time. Let's go.
Oh, fantastic. Courtney, can you share the screen for us, please?
Thanks, Courtney.
Thank you, Courtney.
So this comes out today. LA Times is kind of propitious in the sense that it's viewed by a number of the persons who are subject matter experts in the area of homelessness as one of the more insightful articles that has um, been put forward in quite a period of time. When you scroll, Courtney, um, give me that first paragraph, um, and it moves with a perspective that tries to go back as far as a guy who I actually knew, Art Seidenbaum, who wrote for the Times many, many years ago. I recall being an undergraduate when I first met him. And when he wrote about this, as you see, people were just stunned on the one hand and trying to figure out what was going on in the city of angels
Mm-hmm.
on the other hand. This is in the 70s when Art was touching it. Please move the screen, Courtney. Um, and you see examples of that all through here. It was in, you see, say that homeless people sleep in boxes along storefronts in 1987. When I began writing about homelessness, Norman, we were at SCLC, and it was in the mid 80s when I was writing for the Herald Examiner.
Mm.
And we tapped into this discussion about homelessness. One of the insights that I made at the time was that it was um, not to be viewed as a fad for philanthropy. It had to be taken much more seriously than that. But it wasn't until 5 plus years later that um, the city and the county resolved their legal dispute where the city sued the county on the basis of a lack of cooperation and taking care of the safety net properly, particularly in inclement uh, weather circumstances. What That legal action in terms of the settlement produces what we know as LASA.
Hmm.
So it was in the early 90s. It was when I just joined the city council. Tom Bradley was mayor. I happened to chair the committee that gave oversight to the product. It was economic and community development. There was no homeless committee at that time. And so this is just a little bit of background that moves you forward. You can move the screen, Courtney. Here, the point is being made by the authors that when we look at this, there are about 15 counties throughout this, where in fact you, this is a stunning comment. I see. When they talk about the number of homeless persons in LA County can fill, you see what venue they say they can fill? And then
Dodger
there's
Stadium.
and then room left over in crypto
Hmm.
center. I mean, that just gives you a graphic depiction of the gravity of the issue with which we are contending.
Mm-hmm.
This is an examination overview about the epicenter of America's homeless crisis. Now you can get to numbers on this as well. It's not hard to figure out the math on this. California being the largest state numerically in the United States, LA County being the largest county in the United States, and so clearly the largest county in the state of California. And the city of Los Angeles is the largest city in the county. And so if you move along that path, you'll full well understand that the state has the largest number of homeless persons in the United States. Um, we represent as a state roughly 12% of the population, but 21% of the homeless population across the nation. And so um, the math does what the math does,
Mm-hmm.
yet we have an obligation to go in as forcefully and strategically as we can. This article is worth everybody taking a look at. I'll stop there for those who may have seen it. Otherwise, we want to ask a question or raise an issue or two before we move on to the next article. Anyone? Read the article when you have a chance. I think you will find it worth your while. The next article is also pretty interesting, but it does it chronologically.
Mm-hmm.
So you can look at these two articles together and come to some better understanding as to what is moving along. So these are writers give it captions that are interesting. So, Courtney, let's look at the first caption, if you will. Um, keep moving. So they talk about the 1800s, and the homeless population was given birth in part because jails were too small. Take a look. Think about that. The jails were too small. Juxtapose that against what our reality is today. People coming out of the jails into the streets, back into the jails. We speak of that in terms of recidivism,
Mm-hmm.
uh, big issue. Note that it talked about tramps, hobos, vagrants, and winos off the streets. That is in part um, the backdrop, some of the origins of the homeless crisis that we experience in Los Angeles, but not uniquely Los Angeles, but it's worth taking note of that. Tramps, hobos, vagrants, winos, etc. Um, let's move up, Courtney.
Mm.
In the next century, the city booms, the population quintuples in 2 decades, and it gives more insight into that. You can move the screen a little bit, Courtney. Um, and it talks about the number of building permits that were issued, and it gives some indication of what the housing crisis is beginning to present itself. In the 1930s, Skid Row emerges. The area on the eastern side of downtown, whose cheap residential hotels, bars, liquor stores, and missions made it a magnet for transient to become widely known as Skid Row. Skid Row is not unique to Los Angeles. Skid Rows as such across the country, but the composition, the demographics of Skid Row are the
Mm-hmm.
same. Now take it back to the earlier discussion where we talk about tramps, hobos, winos, and etc. The response was to essentially, somewhat institutionally, feed that and grow that population rather than treat that and heal that population. All right. So we have essentially um, what's now a century of this. Note now, this is the 1930s. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what I want to say parenthetically is this. Um, Up until roughly a decade, 15 years ago, um, the homeless crisis in Los Angeles was largely located in city, um, in Skid Row. It did not remain there. By the time you get to 2015, um, it was roughly 10 to 15% of the homeless population in Los Angeles was located on Skid Row. And what that essentially says is 85 to 90% had spread through other parts of the county. And that's when people really start taking note of it. And that
Mm-hmm.
was one of the driving pieces behind the passage of Measure H, the first countywide measure to address homelessness. It had spread so extensively until people from supervisorial districts 1 through 5 were just not prepared to leave it unaddressed. Courtney, let's look at the next. So by the 30s, we get widespread homelessness. Why? Because of the Great Depression. None of us are uh, surprised by that. And you see the data that speaks to it. Move along, Courtney. After World War II, you have a housing crisis, and they give the data there, and more is punctuated in the Luskin Center for History and Policy, where they go into this in some detail. One of the things I trust that it is being appreciated. This problem just didn't pop up. Homeless, it evolved. It got deeper
Mm-hmm.
and more serious, and the response on the part of the public sector was simply insufficient. Let's move on, Courtney. Some relief related to suburbs, because people felt like what was going on in the urban centers was increasingly problematic, but development, expansion, et cetera, et cetera. became an issue. But I will tell you, the so-called suburbs began to be impacted by the phenomenon of homelessness. And the other point that I want to make is those areas that were defined by relative wealth began to experience it, from Malibu to Santa Monica, etc., parts of the valley, which we already know to be impacted. Courtney? Public housing was a way to address it, but some of that was uh, in during the backdrop of um, international conflicts, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, et cetera, et cetera. Public housing was an attempt to uh, push back on this and to find a way that spoke to affordability. Big debates on how successful it was, but the intent was to try to find options. Therefore, GI loans and housing opportunities that were made uh, available. Be mindful of this is the heightened era of anti-communism, and they want to refer to some of this as socialist housing. So this has a lot of history, much more than I'm prepared to go into right now. I'm trying to move quickly through it, uh, but keep moving, Courtney. Yeah, urban renewal that came up in an interesting way a decade after this point in time. Well, this is the era of Kennedy and Johnson. Then Nixon came in and uh, moved with a fair amount of urban renewal in a way that's considered significant. Therefore, what was happening is places like Bunker Hill at the Civic Center, and what that did was modernize downtown, and it put pressure on housing, um, particularly affordable housing. You'll see that in this article as you look at it more carefully. Courtney? Um, the Latterman-Petraeus Short Act, one of the most controversial pieces of legislation in the state's history. This is a piece that essentially makes it difficult to facilitate anything above and beyond a 72-hour psychiatric hold. So people are outraged when they see homeless persons who are obviously mentally uh, ill or disturbed, naked, uh, defecating, urinating, vomiting, and often in those circumstances die in those circumstances. And because of this particular legislation, which was probably one of the most problematic pieces of legislation that has yet to be repealed, the author of the legislation 10 years in said, I think I made a mistake. And yet, all the efforts over the period of time have not been successful in repealing the Latterman-Petraeus Short Act. You can learn more about that, read into that, but that's a defining issue in terms of persons getting the help that they need. A lot of organizations, powerful organizations, supporting it. Um, and here we are with those who defend it in terms of protecting the civil rights and civil liberties of the patients. Organizations like NAMI weigh in to say, yeah, this is care for patients that is not helpful. Dr. Jerry, you might want to touch that. I see you made a comment in the chat. Any comments you want to offer on that one?
Sure. I'll just say there's this,
some may call it healthy tension. Some may argue, is it a necessary tension? But, really trying to do what's in the best interest of the health and safety of the individual with
Right.
also understanding, protecting people's civil liberties and rights and homeless individuals' rights. And so that really is the tension that our team deals with every day, psych hospitals deal with every day,
Right.
protecting the rights of the individual versus we got to do the right thing for that individual.
Yeah. This is a 50-year debate, discussion. And yet the homeless population has expanded. Thanks for that insight, Dr. Jerry. Courtney? So we have the housing crisis that's, I'll say no more than there's a backlog of some 500,000 in the county of Los Angeles alone in terms of the lack of vacancy, which is a driver on the cost of housing. And this is a huge issue, particularly as we are trying to deal with the question of affordable housing and building it in a way that is quality, affordable, efficient, and costly as it relates to the construction. So you hear all these discussions about this is ridiculous. It's causing five, six, $700,000 to build a unit, a single unit for a homeless person. This enrages a number of people. We've got to get to resolution on this. And this is a part of what the housing crisis and the complexity that informs it today is about. Courtney? Then we know, anecdotally at least, Reagan's slashing social services and closing X number of mental health facilities throughout the state. LA County never recuperated from that fully. And then this is the point at which we move into a recession. And everybody knows when those who are substantially well suited from a financial point of view sneeze, those who are not catch a cold or worse, right? And so Reagan's policy of cutting the services plus the recession really reinforced and compound. Then comes crack. Okay. Nothing like that. Just nothing like it. It tore communities up in every way conceivable, families and across ethnic lines, I might add. And it moved along generational lines because you had an epidemic of crack, quote unquote, crack babies. Now, I'm not an OBGYN and anything near close to that, but I do know that this was a really, really tough moment. And some of those babies are alive, and some of those babies had babies. So this crack epidemic, hugely consequential on the mental health front, on the addiction front. And in the 80s, it wasn't the case that services were being provided for those who were addicted on the one hand and having mental health challenges on the other hand. They were treated separately. It was only a decade or two afterwards that they began to um, really address the issue of co-occurring disorders. And it made it real hard to help treat persons who need help as a part of the issue. So, Dr. Jerry, you might know the specific time in which we touched that, and others on the line may as well. Courtney? Look in the chat, Dr. Jerry dropped that in
Yes.
there.
I just dropped a couple of resources there, but I mean, absolutely, just like we were saying, healthy tension of protecting the rights of the individual against doing what's in their best health and safety interest. Likewise, so long we have this fractured and broken healthcare system where we see your physical body over there, your mind over here, your substance use and alcoholism over there, and then the health of the public somewhere. And all of that needs to come together so we can take care of the individual, the family, the community unit. And that is why we have to address these as co-occurring diagnoses and really understand that we need to have a lens on these are conditions that need treatment.
Right.
And so that's really how do we center policy around that framework.
I do not.
I would like to jump in on this mental illness situation. I
Tell
read,
your name, and your serial
oh,
number. Who's speaking?
oh, this is Donna Irons.
Okay, Donna, go right ahead.
Yes, I have read something around the first of this year about Governor Newsom passing some type of regulation or a law or something uh, about assuming the state taking conservatorship over some of these mentally ill homeless people.
Right.
And so I haven't heard anything about this particular plan being implemented. And I wanted to know if anybody on this call know anything about why it's not being implemented. Because one thing about mentally ill people, especially if they drugged out, they don't know that they're mentally ill. A lot of these people, they don't know that. So you can't really, to me, it seemed like a solution for some of these mentally ill people is to assume conservatorship and to get them into treatment programs. So can somebody jump in as to this conservatorship plan that Governor Newsom spoke about earlier this year?
Big
They
debate.
still have to agree to wanting the conservatorship. So if they opt out, then they don't get it.
If they what?
Opt
If
out.
Yeah, if they decide that they don't need it, because a lot of times with their mental illness, they're in denial, and a lot of times they don't know what they need, and they may often reject treatment or reject even someone to take on their concerns, such as conservatorship.
But
So
with
Don,
this is,
big
but
is
oh,
big is you can't do these things against people's will. That's the civil
Mhm.
liberty
I
argument.
I understand that, and I used to work for DPSS dealing with the homeless people for almost 30 years and outside of DPSS. And I've also assumed conservatorship for people who are mentally ill. If the representative or the state can gather medical records showing that these people have a history of illness and drug abuse, they don't have a choice if you can if you have sufficient documentation through medical professionals that says they have whatever problem, if it be schizo or bipolar or whatever.
Yeah,
So
that
it's not
that's
just up
true.
to the
That's true
person.
if they're sick.
And so if I can just finish, so with that being said, I just don't see
I'm sorry.
the social service component to this, that they would, the funding to have social workers or whoever to start talking to these people out here on the street, finding out where they're, where, because some of them have had medical services before with some professionals throughout some of their mental illness or their drug abuse. It's just a matter of people or the social service workers to gather that information. And as the state could take this conservatorship, they have proof that they are mentally ill and that they need to go into services.
Okay.
Thank you.
They can take on the responsibility if that uh, person is endangering their lives, like they're going to actually die on the street. Then they can
Ma'am, that's
take
not
them.
true. I
But they have
worked
to
on
be
cases
really,
like this for
really
30 years.
ill
That's not true.
or
It's
getting
not true.
ready
Okay.
to.
I
It's
think
not
that
Donna,
true.
there,
Donna,
Yes.
what we're trying to say is the following.
Okay.
There are huge
Okay.
impediments to this. Huge. and the County of Los Angeles is governed by a series of regulations and laws that cannot be violated. You asked a question about Governor Newsom's efforts. They have not been successful in terms of the full scope of what's happening in terms of conservatorship on the one hand, and the laws that are passed have to be backed by budget allocations that don't always follow the laws. In other words, it takes money to implement these programs in a significant way. And the regulations
I agree.
in terms of beds and so forth is hugely complex. But I don't
Mhm.
believe we ought to rest on that issue of complexity and say we can't figure this out. My view is that we have to keep leaning in, and that's why conversations like this that happen with the frequency that they do end up being so fundamentally important in the faith-based context, in the service sector with respect to nonprofits, and beyond. We need to move more swiftly and deeply in terms of health institutions and how they step on the issue up to address the issue of homelessness as well. So it's multifactorial, and the politics of homelessness happen to be huge as well. Well, I'm not going to let you all cause me to contradict myself. I'm going to get through the because Rhea will just never let me live it down.
That's very
Let's
true.
Okay, thank
you're
you. And I
welcome.
You're
totally agree
welcome.
with
Yeah, we'll weigh in at any point. We take that. Courtney, let's finish this piece in terms of the chronology. Okay.
I agree with you, Mr. Ridley. It's about the budget, and I'm
It
glad you
is.
clarified that.
It's always about that. Follow the money.
Yes.
All right, Courtney, you can bring that up a little bit. These are a bunch of legal entanglements that have tied the issue of homelessness up um, for a good period of time. The standing law in Boise was essentially to prevent local governments from doing very much to address homelessness in terms of
Mhm.
moving people from the streets and so forth. So that stood for a long time against the wishes of a substantial number of local, uh, let me just say, municipalities and larger jurisdictions. The county of Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles opposed it unsuccessfully. But then they took it to the Supreme Court ultimately, and the Supreme Court gave more room to local jurisdictions to address the question of homelessness from more of a law enforcement perspective.
Mm.
That's to be um, carefully. I don't subscribe personally to a law enforcement perspective. I'm more inclined to move a health oriented perspective that makes substantial the issues of services and supports. Let me just put it in these crisp terms. Do not send a police officer to do a social worker or a doctor's job.
Mhm.
Don't send a doctor or a social worker to do a police officer's job.
Mhm.
Got to get this right, and if persons are violent, they have to be subdued in the proper ways. We get that. But if they are not, we don't need to have police officers engaging and triggering them so it turns into a violent episode. You following me?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
a lot of this with these lawsuits and so forth revolved around that. Courtney? Listen, let me just say fentanyl and the whole range of new iteration drugs contributed substantially to the death rate of homelessness, so that you hadn't had more people die for homelessness per annum than people who were victims of homicide in the county of Los Angeles. Just startling. But the drug scene is nothing to trifle with as it relates to contributing to the homeless crisis. So, I mean, this article just is trying to break this up in terms of what specific episodes, eras that really have defined the way that the homeless crisis has taken place in LA. And I think you read this in tandem with the article why Los Angeles is the epicenter of homelessness in LA, in the nation. So I just wanted to kind of roll through that as clumsily as I did, but I think there's a lot to be further discussed in that regard. Now, I can say there are two other pieces here, namely the study that was done by RAND, and they have some high points. We could save it for our next meeting, but just quickly running through it, the high points are coordinated below there in terms of the key findings. These are really kind of important in terms of the total number of unsheltered people declined by 15% in 2024. Now, this is not the annual homeless count that is required by law that LAHSA does. This is done by a private sector entity, namely RAND, that was largely focused on military research and so forth, and is moving to other areas at this point. But it gives you a nice view of the high points, what happened in Hollywood, what happened in Venice, what happened in Skid Row. Hollywood, Venice went down, Skid Row did not. And then you have to dig into what's going on there. They talked about there were fewer Black or African American unsheltered residents compared with past years. So that's an interesting piece of data. We'll see what the LAHSA results show in that regard. And also the issue of older adults as well as females. What those data points look like. Really, really important. So, you know, it has to be broken out in terms of Latinos, Asians, whites, males, females, young, old, those who are defined as mentally ill, those who are unemployed, etc. All of that data has to be disaggregated in order to understand what's really going on. How many of them are victim survivors of domestic violence and or sexual assault? All that data is embedded in these studies so that we really understand what we are getting after. All right, so I think I'm going to step back for a moment. Rhea, if there are other questions and the like, let's take a few more minutes and do that.
Sure.
Derek, I'm not letting you off the hook. If you got something to say, jump in here, man. It's all good.
No, appreciate you bringing up the loss of point in time count and how it somewhat relates to the RAND study as well. And my intention was to kind of go over the loss of point in time count today, but we are going to release those results on Monday. So I've had to, apologies everybody, push my presentation for you all back to the next meeting. But really want to highlight the fact that we do encourage these different methodologies that you guys see. So the loss of point in time count is a lot different than what we see from the RAND count. But to get the most accurate view, you put all of these different methodologies together. So it is important for you guys to still read that. And although what you're going to hear from me in 2 weeks is going to be a little bit different from what you see there, it is not to be of competing efforts. You need them both to put that story fully together.
Thank you, Derek.
2 weeks, Derek, is on.
Confirmed.
I'll
Locked
be
and
here.
loaded.
2 weeks. I'll be here.
I, you know, Supervisor and Derek, as we think about these data, I also think it's those first two articles that we reviewed, they give us such a not complete, but a more nuanced trajectory of how we got to where we are. And for many years, Supervisor, you always say homelessness is the moral crisis of our time. And I that resonates so hard and so true. And I think that these articles especially elucidate that, especially the first two that we reviewed. We always talk about three main driving factors for why we have this crisis of homelessness: affordable housing, which we see addressed over and over; systemic racism, which we somewhat see alluded to. And I wish that these articles, when they talk about different ethnicities and populations experience who are unhoused, I wish that they also gave comparative data of, this is how many Asians are unhoused Angelinos, and this is what the total population within the total population of Angelinos in LA County, this population identifies as Asian. I think it's really important to understand that so we can see the systemic racism piece. Of course, the affordable housing and lack of housing. I also think it's important for us to realize that that third factor that we often speak about that isn't as vastly addressed, is the wage gap, the economics.
Also
Los
about
Angeles
the
County.
Black population. I didn't hear you mention the Black population.
Sure, I'm giving an
Most of
example.
them
I'll
are
get there,
in
Jolly.
Skid Row.
So I think that as we consider the economics of it, that wage gap is so important and it correlates to the other two pieces. To Jolly's point, yes, that is something that we see within our population of unhoused Angelinos. We see Black African American people overrepresented, meaning that they are the largest demographic of people who are unhoused, of Angelinos who are unhoused.
Thank
However,
you.
what is most important to understand within that is Black African American people are not the largest population in Los Angeles County. So, what does it mean when a population, an ethnicity, or demographic that is not the largest population within the area is
They're,
the
they're
demographic, that
actually
an
shrinking.
ethnicity that's experiencing
The
the,
blacks,
the
the black
highest level of
population.
being unhoused? Jolly, did you have a question?
She's on mute.
Yeah, I just asked to unmute.
The Black population, they're
Mhm.
actually leaving. So they're trying to find resources. So um, the numbers are shrinking. But the need of the remainder of the Blacks that are here, there's still
Mhm.
a majority of them have great needs.
Do
Although
you mean
they're,
the number of that are unhoused or number in
yes,
general and throughout?
unhoused and underhoused
Hmm.
and underrepresented as well.
No, understood. It's a disproportional issue still.
Hmm.
Yes.
I mean, this a data point that I didn't mention that I will now is, for example, in the city and county of Los Angeles, less than 10% of the general population of African Americans hovers around 10%. It hovers around 10%. And yet, when you look at the proportionality in terms of the homeless population, African Americans uh, move in the area of between 35 and 40%. Now, what's
Hmm.
interesting about that is those numbers, get this, hold up across the country.
Hmm.
The African American population in homeless sectors across the country run close to 40%, irrespective of their numbers in the general population.
Wow.
And when we did the study in 2018, 2019 on Black people experiencing homelessness in LA, it was the first time it had been done
Hmm.
in the city of Los Angeles, in the county of Los Angeles. And what we didn't know at the time, it was a first and only study of African Americans experiencing homelessness anywhere in the United States.
Wow.
This is 2018, 2019. Imagine that. So what does that tell you about how seriously the issue has been taken against the backdrop of all of what we have discussed?
Yes.
Who's been serious about this for real? For real. Now, I'm going to leave it at that and say, stay tuned
Thank you.
Yep.
for our next conversation,
Thank you, sir.
because there'll be a lot going on in the next conversation. The featured speaker will be Brother Derek.
Woo!
He will be guided through it through Madam Chair Rhea. And who knows, Dr. Abraham might have to come back and have to keep us in order. He might have to administer us some meds to keep us straight at the next meeting, because it's going to be on and popping.
And Pastor Johnson's going to have to pray over
pray.
us.
Pastor Johnson, you might need to get ready to pray. You got
All right.
the invocation and the benediction on that one.
All right.
Anything more before us at this point, Madam Chair?
No, I think that's it. And Supervisor, thank you so much. It's not, often that we get such a phenomenal guest speaker to lead us through making sense of all of this.
Appreciate it very much. More to come. Question. Were there any other questions before we adjourn? Linda? Okay, thank you. We good for now?
Good
Yes,
for
sir.
now. Yes.
All minds clear? We're good.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right.